Yeah, and Justin, it's interesting because Google is also saying that Apple isn't getting the same level of antitrust scrutiny in Europe. Is that a fair claim?
So this is a classic big tech tactic. If you're getting scrutiny from the media, from regulators, from really anybody, you not only attack that head on, you also deflect and say, look at this company. So, if you're Facebook getting hit with Congress questions about disinformation, you say, look at Twitter. In this case, if you're Google, and you're getting hit with antitrust complaints about your app store, you say, well, what about Apple? Why aren't you looking at Apple? Um, and right, I mean, Google and Apple are heavily used app stores. There have been antitrust concerns raised in many countries about their practices, not just in the EU bloc. But this also doesn't mean that two things can't be true at once. Just because there might be issues that the regulator should look at with Apple doesn't also mean that Google's dominance in online search, in online ads, and its chokehold on this app market doesn't present, market competition and innovation issues as well.
How successful will Google be, do you think, in challenging, of course, this record fine, as we've been talking about, $5.1 billion, or if you look at it, obviously paid in euros at 4.34 billion euros?
Yeah, it's a huge fine. And I think, it's hard to tell at this point what's going to happen. We've seen in the past few years, executive authorities in the EU say one thing on tech regulation, and then a court turns around and says something completely different. But this is exactly why it's such an important moment for tech regulation and for tech companies that operate around the world, because one of the biggest criticisms of EU tech regulation to date, whether that's antitrust or privacy with GDPR, is that for all these restrictions that are put in place, there haven't actually been fines and other enforcements to back up those regulatory moves. And so what we're seeing now, like I said, is the largest fine the watchdog has ever issued, period, and it's targeted at a large tech company. So, how this plays out, what kind of fragmentation we see within the EU on antitrust is a really important signal.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, but do watchdogs and regulators need to have perhaps sharper teeth instead of issuing fines? Should there be more tangible consequences for behaviour that they deem to be uncompetitive?
Yeah, I think, for those that are concerned about this kind of behavior, a fine is a step, but many analysts have pointed out that very issue, which is for a company like Google that has so much money, they don't like a $5 billion fine, but it's basically just a slap on the wrist. So how do we get to that next level of forcing changes in business practice or pricing models? It's going to take a lot more than a fine.